my name is Alex, this is Nicole and Kaylee, and what we have been doing in our English 10 class is we have all read the book Adrift, written by Steven Callahan, and we have been working on identifying tones and styles within the story, as well as practicing question-making.
Although not everyone has read the book, we can all imagine what it was like to be in Mr. Callahan's situation. Picture this. You're alone at sea, starving, covered in searing boils, and your only companions and food source are fish.
Steven Callahan has overcome an astonishing voyage being lost at sea for 76 days. He is kindly here with us today to talk about his journey and answer any questions you might have.
And now, here to introduce the man himself, our principal, Mr. Saga.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Kaylee, Alex, and Nicole. I think we have future, public speakers right here. You guys do a great job. It's my privilege today to introduce our author, Steven Callahan. Steve's visit with us today is part of a Concord Reads initiative, a citywide literary event in which citizens of all ages and backgrounds read and discuss themes and discuss ideas in the same book. This is the first time that Concord Reads has teamed up with Concord High School. We're very happy. This is our first event. You guys could not have been a more patient audience. As I walked in, I know you guys have been gathered down here for a little while, and I assure you that today's event will be well worth that wait. Steve's exciting and inspiring memoir, Adrift, about the 76 days he spent alone at sea, is this year's selection for Concord Reads. The book has been described by National Geographic as one of the best adventure books of all time. It was a New York Times bestseller, and since it was first published in 1986, it's been translated into 16 languages. It was chosen the best book of the 80s and the best book for young adults by the American Library Association. In his own words, Steve Callahan has spent most of his 60-some-odd years messing around with boats. Raised in Dover, Massachusetts, Steve began sailing as a Boy Scout. He taught himself the basics of boat design and navigation and helped to build a 40-footer before graduating from high school. Gotta let Mr. Rothenberg, our CRTC director, know that might be a new program that we have waiting at Concord High, boat building. Over the years, Steve, who lives in Maine, has worked as a boat builder, designer, and consultant, and he has sailed over 80,000 miles. In 1982, after his sloop Napoleon Solo was lost in the Atlantic, it's the very picture we're looking at, Steve spent 76 days by himself on an inflatable raft and with very few supplies. Steve is here with us this morning to share his personal story of survival and resilience and how he fought back against what seemed to be impossible odds. Tomorrow, today, April 21st, marks the 35th anniversary of Steve's rescue. We are glad to have him here with us to celebrate this very special occasion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saga, and thank you for having me, as well as Kayleen Shaloska. I'm sorry, I'm horrible to mispronounce that, in the English department here, as well as Laura Kiernan, Caitlin Sackman, and all connected to the Concord Reads program. I'd like to take it back to the Stone Age of 1981, before cell phones, GPS, the internet, or even personal computers, when I drift for 2.5 months in an inflated raft, learning to live like an aquatic caveman, which I can assure you was about the dumbest way ever to cross the Atlantic Ocean. In high school, I was small, shy, socially awkward, not a jock or an intellectual whiz kid. I found it easiest to go my own way, didn't mind being alone. And was one of those irritating kids who always challenged everybody's side in an argument. I was most comfortable at sea or in the mountains. I loved the sense of freedom there and embraced the self-reliance and adaptability that any isolated environment with limited resources demands. I might have liked to go into space. I was captivated by the largely unexplored space of the world's oceans. Thor Heyerdahl's voyage in Kon-Tiki and other raft voyages enticed me because they were as much about being out there as getting someplace. And there were many even more reachable adventures, like Robert Manry's crossing of the Atlantic in a tiny 13.5-foot boat named Tinkerbell. John Guswell went one better, taking the 21-foot Trekka all the way around the world. They showed that a life of adventure was available to anyone. You didn't have to be rich or a genius. Maybe my being not all that smart might even help. Then came Robin Lee Graham. We were about the same age as he sailed around the world on his 24-foot Dove. He even got the girl, all while I suffered through Latin, and I can tell you I was pretty put out. Eventually, I'd come to appreciate how becoming a good mariner actually demands a very rounded knowledge. Aero and hydrodynamics, weather, geography, oceanography, astronomy, material sciences, craftsmanship, even art and philosophy all apply. At first, though, venturing upon the sea just felt right, and it was available. I was fascinated by boats, those man-made creations that uniquely combine vehicle, dwelling, and art. But building the boat was not the end goal, because in the end, boats are just a pretty cool tool with which to get out there. My 21-foot Napoleon Solo pictured here was to become my affordable passport to 2/3 of the planet. Oops. Living aboard was an attractive, efficient, and low-impact lifestyle. But it was going to sea that it always provided a bonus of a spiritual journey. The sea fills one with humility and awe. Alan Watts, once credited with bringing Buddhism to America, once wrote, "Sport is the zen of Western man." It took me some time to understand that both are about the now. When you're really tuned in, whether climbing a mountain or, for that matter, creating art or solving a problem, the past and future disappear. Sports people call it being in the zone, when being fully present is all that counts. When you sail, you become an orchestrator of a machine, man, wind, and wave. Your vessel becomes much more than an inanimate object. In fact, your boat dances and breathes, and you become the brain of your beast. By 1981, I really wasn't much good at anything else. I was terrible at business and relationships and was suffering a failed marriage. So I sailed my Napoleon Solo across the Atlantic, achieving my childhood goals. I had lived my life of adventure, proved such a modest boat could serve well as home and voyager. But that small triumph, along with my youth, was at an end. The first stage of survival begins before a crisis. During pre-impact, preparation is key. I thought I was prepared for anything. I'd read all the books. People even wondered why I carried a 6-person life raft. I'd soon demonstrate why. 8 days out on my return trip across the Atlantic, I entered stage 2 of the survival arc, impact. During this stage, about 15% of people panic. About 15% are highly functional, can save themselves and become effective leaders. Frankly, about 2/3 of us may be ready and willing, but are too confused or dumbfounded to act. Without guidance, the bulk of us will be inactive or dysfunctional. Folks in burning buildings have been known to hear the smoke alarm, go out in the hallway and even smell the smoke, and then return to their desks to tidy up. Mariners tend to be pretty functional during impact, perhaps because various levels of disaster are so routine for them. Floating in the world's largest, most corrosive soup, mariners find at sea that Murphy's Law is optimistic, that not only will anything that can go wrong, but even the things that can't possibly go wrong will find some way of going wrong. And since you can't really just wait for roadside assistance, you must find creative solutions to problems using the little at hand, often quickly. Denial is often the number one enemy of the survivor. We must embrace reality as quickly and efficiently as possible, no matter how painful, in order to make an effective plan, prioritize, and act. The most functional of us can psychologically split. When disaster strikes, fear, grief, and hopelessness can mingle with hope, even excitement and humor. as they did within me as I undertook functional activity while feeling doomed. I even thought a bit of a chuckle that the film camera on the aft deck had somehow come on and was capturing some really great footage that nobody would ever see. We're not single-dimensional animals, but instead think and feel many things at the same time, especially during meaningful events. Inner conflicts between competing parts of ourselves would become a primary theme running through Adrift. Once one has escaped the immediate threat, depression and confusion can set in during the stage of survival arc sometimes called recoil, a time of disorientation and basically being totally freaked out. Even knowing others that face similar challenges did not quell my desperate feeling of being completely alone and seeing no way to make a life upon this immense watery desert. My numerous failures and scant successes haunted me. I was faced with drifting a distance and at a speed roughly equivalent to getting down on hands and knees and crawling from here to the Rocky Mountains. Many escape the immediate threat only to die during recoil, often before there is purely physical explanation. The scale and task is just too overwhelming. Almost every survivor feels doomed at first. To fight this desperation, survivors do not dwell on the big picture, but divide it into achievable bits. When the mountain climber profiled and touching the void fell into a crevasse, he focused on crawling to the next rock. I struggled to stay warm, get through the night, then the next day. I normalized life as much as possible, taking the attitude that this was not the end of the voyage. It was a continuation, although in a slightly more modest craft. I clung to routines, navigate, keep a log, exercise, make meals, modifying them to suit my new world. And I invented new routines for fishing, resting, making water, always prioritizing and rationing. Making repairs or fashioning new tools or devices consumed a good bit of my time, but I had always approached the voyage with the attitude that if one plans for and takes care of the worst, the best takes care of itself. I learned that if necessity is the mother of invention, survival is the matriarch. Survivors classically repurpose materials, tools, even people by identifying their prime qualities. What something was designed to do, or what someone's job was, matters little. What they can do is essential. When a small plane crashed en route to the Bahamas, the passengers floated off only with what they wore. That night, two men discovered in their pockets, their wallets, reflective, shiny surfaces called credit cards. The next day, they signaled the passing aircraft with their cards, which of course gives new meaning to the question, what's in your wallet? We want the chance to correct our mistakes, to build better lives. But above all, what keeps survivors going, where they find purpose, is a connection to something bigger than themselves. Their philosophy, their religion, family, community, companions, the environment. In truth, life is chaos. Survival is particularly so. But these connections allow us to edit reality, impose meaning, some order and purpose upon it, to tell a story about it, to make sense of it. Even while in the life raft rubber ducky, my most essential survival tools included a dime store pad of paper and pencils. One suffers, makes mistakes, withstands setbacks, but slowly a new life emerges from the chaos, and we adapt. That's stage 4. I became the mayor of Duckyville, but I had to still wage political battles between the physical, emotional, and rational parts of myself, each with competing desires and fears. If we're with others, we also have to deal with their personalities. Both within ourselves and reflected in others, we can find both strengths and weaknesses, assets and liabilities. We need to be aware that a strength can become a weakness in some circumstances, or vice versa. We need to be flexible and accepting, not to waste any resource. By the end of the voyage, like all survivors, I learned I was stronger and more resilient than I ever imagined. I also was reminded of my many weaknesses, which was equally valuable. Most importantly, I learned that opportunity coexists with challenge. The Chinese symbol for crisis wisely combines symbols of danger and opportunity. It is just one paradox that I found lurking everywhere in life. There were no ideal conditions, just conditions, with benefits and detriments. No decision was either completely successful or a failure. We want to be captains of our own destiny, but even captains suffer hardship, breakdowns, even shipwreck. You might not be able to control what happens to you, but you do have a choice about how you face it, what you do with it. Every decision you make will lead you down a slightly different path, and you can either gain from the struggles you face or dig yourself into a big hole. Like most survivors I've met, I do not want to revisit that life of hardship, but I witnessed and felt things, developed a relationship with myself and with the world that I could not have in any other way. Endings are for books, of course. In reality, every experience is just the beginning for the rest of your life. When I was bombing about the Atlantic those 35 years ago, it would have been impossible for me to have envisioned a career writing, designing more boats, visiting exotic places, meeting such a wide range of other survivors and talents. I lived to make many other voyages, some pushing the envelope with the simplest craft, or those combining the gifts of both ancient and modern technologies with this proa going across the Pacific. My experience drifting also took me into new kinds of voyages. In 2010, director Ang Lee asked me to help take even landlubber audiences into the greatest wilderness in the world, to show the full personality of the ocean rather than just making it a setting. Life of Pi had been considered unfilmable, yet we undertook that challenging voyage, not knowing where it might lead. In the end, it allowed me to give a new life to the spirit of the narrator that nourished me, tested me, almost killed me, and in the end brought my salvation 35 years earlier. Why do we undertake that which is considered undoable? Why take risks to discover anything? When Dodge Morgan was asked why he wanted to be the first American to sail around the world alone and nonstop, his reply was, because it's different and difficult. Don't get me wrong, fun's great, but perhaps it's not always all it's cracked up to be. Stretching oneself, maybe even suffering as a result, often is more rewarding than a moment of fun. You may be tested, you may fail, but even failure is a learning experience. I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work, declared Thomas Edison, referring to his struggles to invent the light bulb. In the end, it's the fulfillment you gain from facing challenges, learning from mistakes, transforming setbacks into something positive that deeply nourishes our lives. Or at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you.
Sure, come on right up. So I'd like to introduce our next guest. Laura Kieran is a member of the Monitor editorial board and a part-time editorial writer. During her long career in print and broadcast journalism, Laura has been a reporter at the Washington Post and the Boston Globe, and hosted the award-winning show Perspectives on New Hampshire Public Radio. She holds a bachelor's in politics from Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and a Master of Studies in Law from Yale Law School. From 2001 to 2013, Laura worked for the New Hampshire court system, where she founded the Public Information Office and was Communications Director and Special Assistant to the Supreme Court Chief Justice. She and her husband are longtime residents of Concord. We are so very pleased to have you with us here today to help facilitate this conversation.
Let's be back at Concord High. Can you hear us? Thank you, Steve, so much. Glad you're here on your second birthday, day of your rescue.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a conversation here at the stage with my student colleagues, who we'll introduce in a moment. We'll talk to Steve about the book and about his experience, and then we're going to take questions from you. We'll have people in the aisles. You can line up to ask a question. If things come to you while we're talking, jot them down. And the purpose of our being here is for you all to be able to talk to Steve about his really extraordinary and inspiring adventure. So can we introduce ourselves and then we'll get started? You can say who you are.
All right. I'm Abigail Claire, and I'm a sophomore.
Good.
My name's Arthur Stone, I'm also a sophomore.
Sophomore.
My name's Hunter Cogswell, much like that, I'm a sophomore.
Very good. All right, jump in whenever you have a question. Steve, let's begin by telling us what happened on February 4th, 1982.
Basically, I was on my way home, or what I thought was my way home. I had already taken Napoleon Solo across the Atlantic and had sailed down the coast of Spain, Portugal, out to Madeira, the island of Madeira, and then down to the Canary Islands, just that stretch off the coast of Africa, off the Sahara Desert there, quite far into the Atlantic. I had a beautiful week of sailing, and I was on what's considered the milk run, just easy sail to the Caribbean. The weather was kicking up a little bit, but I wasn't too worried because we'd been through several gales before. Everything seemed under control, and around the middle of the night, big bash in the side of the hull, and a river of water started flowing through the boat, so I thought I was going straight down.
What did you hit, do you know?
I'll never know what it was. I've seen offshore containers, pieces of boats, logs, whole trees, all kinds of things that I could have hit. But collisions with sea creatures is pretty common as well. The boat was in roughly 10, 12-foot waves that are making a fair amount of noise, and a sailboat doesn't make much more noise than that. So I think it probably was a whale just swimming along, minding its own business. I've hit whales before, and basking sharks, and I have plenty of friends who hit animals too, so I think it was just
So what was the first thing you did?
I leapt up. I had gone through this kind of scenario in my mind, rehearsed it many times before. I had a ditch kit full of equipment, life raft on the back. I'm sure there we are. There's a canister right here, which is a life raft, and it weighs about 100 pounds or so. And the boat was filling with water quite quickly, so
Can you show us how did it go down?
Okay,
I'm no sailor here, Steve,
yeah.
as you know.
All right, basically, there was a hole someplace on this side, and when the boat filled up with water, it would float like the water line would be like that, something like that. So it was a little bit of the tail end sticking up, and this whole part of the boat was totally underwater.
Where were you? Where were you in the...
Where was I? I leapt up on the deck at that point and got the life raft inflated because I thought the boat was just going to go straight to the bottom and leave me behind with no life raft or anything, so it was important to get the raft.
And how tough was it to get the raft open?
That was actually, although it's got like this ripcord you keep pulling out, and it finally pulls the pin on a CO2 cartridge and inflates the raft. But I kept pulling and nothing happened, and I was a little freaked out. And finally it did, and now it says on the instructions for the raft, make sure you float it off, toss it overboard before inflation, but basically overboard was on board, so it was pretty easy. Every wave was totally washing over the boat.
When you realized the boat was going down and you were gathering everything, did you find you were acting more on instinct, or were you, mentally present and thinking?
I was, that's, again, I feel like at least I'm very schizophrenic or something, but this often happens with people in early stages of survival, especially. You become very conscious of having a lot of different levels. So part of me was acting kind of on instinct. I dealt with emergencies before in isolated environments. I grew up running around in the mountains, camping, and going offshore where things break down. So part of me was just like going through the drill. But my mind was very active too. I had this voice, saying, you're going to die, this is it. And, totally freaked out. And then another voice in me telling me to shut the hell up and get on with it. And part of me being amused because there's a film camera on the back. Right here was a film camera. And somehow the electrical system had fused together or something, and the camera had come on, which was taking really amazing footage. And so I was kind of amused by that at the same time. So, you have all these things going on in your head, and that's why I mentioned they could sometimes call it psychological splitting. People who, pilots, police, various people who deal with emergency emergencies a lot tend to be very good in these early situations because they've gone through drills so much that they're able to, even though they have fear and all these other things going on, they're focused on what they need to do.
Is your brain still like that even when you're not, like, just going about daily life? Do you still think in that kind of way?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I pay attention to lots of voices there. Like I said, I mean, maybe I'm a bit more schizophrenic than other people, but when I look at anything, people talk about the relationships like this all the time, right? They love their kids, they love their wife, and they want to kill them sometime. You have a lot of different emotions within you about everything, and going through this at that age really made me much more conscious of that as I go through life.
So you inflated the raft.
Yeah.
And you jump into the raft.
Right.
And you tether it to Napoleon Solo, which is going down. Tell us what happened next.
Well, the waves are pretty big, and they're bashing the raft up pretty badly because the boat full of water is like a huge anchor, and the raft is bobbling along on the top of the ocean. So, I'm sure most of you at least have been to the beach with big breakers coming in, and those would crash into the raft. So it was kind of like being in an auto accident every few minutes. And just before dawn, a breaker hit the raft, and all of a sudden it seemed remarkably peaceful in comparison to what it had been. And I looked out and I was drifting away. So what I had it tied to on the boat must have broken, and there I was. Next stop would be the Caribbean, down about 2,000 miles away.
What you have with you in terms of supplies?
I had my ditch kit had a bunch of things that would become useful. Lots of bits of line and knives and I had solar stills in the raft and in my ditch kit. I had a shorty spear gun I bought in the Canary Islands that would provide me with virtually all of my food.
Solar still is for filtering water?
It basically is a little atmosphere that you pour seawater into it, drips down in this cloth that the sun comes out, evaporates the fresh water out, and rains down. And that's great in theory, but they're very difficult to use, and so it took me a while to figure it out. And I had a couple of cushions and a sodden sleeping bag, but that was essential for staying warm.
Do you have a question on here? Yes, I was going to ask, if you hadn't stayed attached to Napoleon, what would you have done from that point if it hadn't broken?
If I hadn't broken away from the boat?
Yeah.
Well, I was actually hoping to stay connected to the boat because I figured at daylight, at the very least, I could dive back aboard. I had to get back aboard the boat, dive down, and get the equipment that I had. And by the time I did, I was exhausted. And but I was hoping in daylight I could take another trip below because I had bags of food and I had water in 5-gallon jugs. A 5-gallon jug of water is about a 40-day survival ration. So that would have been really valuable. And of course I had fantasies that, maybe I could see what the damage is and somehow affect some kind of jury rig repair and refloat the boat and carry on, but it wasn't to be.
I was wondering, that's an interesting question, if you had stayed tied to Napoleon Solo, and the raft was rubber ducky, that's all you needed, would you have gone down with the boat?
If the boat sank, it probably would have pulled me under. But I had it rigged, the line to the raft. I had it a knot, a kind of slip knot affair, so that I knew that if that happened, and also there's a knife in the raft. It comes with every raft, actually, just inside. It's got a dull tip so you don't jab the tubes, but it's sharp otherwise, so you can cut the painter so you don't get pulled down with the boat.
So forth.
Of all the supplies that went down with the ship, what would you have most likely have?
I'd say water. It's critical. We say there's a saying that people need shelter, food, and clothing. That those are your basic needs, and that's actually a little incorrect. Because you can live almost a month without food, the average person. You can only live about 10 days without water, and that's there's a lot of variety there depending on your body type and where you are, how hot it is and all that kind of stuff. But these are just rules of thumb. And shelter and clothing is actually the same thing. It's insulation from the environment. We're very sensitive to changes in temperature. So at the first part of the voyage, I'd be very cold at night and suffering from hypothermia with loss of body heat. So it was essential that I be covered up. And during the second half of the voyage, staying cool during the day when it was really hot was really critical. So those are in terms of prioritizing, it was always prioritizing, first of all, your immediate condition of hypothermia, which can kill you in minutes, to water, which can kill you in days, to food, which can kill you in a longer period of time.
When you first realized that you were drifting away from the boat because the line had snapped, what were like the emotions running through your head? What were the first things that you
Well,
thought?
again, they were very mixed. Because although I had hoped that maybe I could get back aboard and get gear and maybe even repair the boat, there was a huge risk that if I stayed tied to the boat, the raft could have been torn apart by the waves. That was a real risk. So getting broken away, I was like, well, I wish I could have stayed there, but on the other hand, here I am. And as I said in my opening remarks, successful survivors may, have certain desires and things, but what's really important is to get a grip on the reality. It's like, I'm here now, get over it, and even if I'm going to have those disappointments within me to move on.
Not just being scared, freaked out, wouldn't you think?
Oh, I was plenty freaked out, trust me. I knew about where I was, pretty much in the middle of the Atlantic. I didn't think I had enough food and water to last even to the shipping lanes, not to mention to the Caribbean. And a very common feeling amongst survivors in these early stages is you just feel totally doomed. It's like, there's no way I'm going to make this. The ocean was beautiful, clear, but no food here. I can't get the solar stills to work. I mean, it's like everything is messed up. And it's like, I'm just posed. And yet, what we try to do is, try to tackle things one small step at a time. Not, I had to thinking about the overall goal was just too much. And mixed in with all this, I was beating myself up terribly because I was like, I've just been a total failure in life. I was talking, I had terrible relationships, I was bad at business, it was just, I made, I achieved a few small things, but what are they worth in the end? So it took a long time to get through that, normalizing life, doing, trying to, starting to exercise in different times, setting up routines, navigating, like I was still commanding this little ship, Rubber Ducky, was important. And eventually those little successes add up and you learn how to make new life.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any part of you that was like lost when you realized that you were never going to see the Napoleon again?
What do you mean by lost?
Like the Napoleon Solo is like part of you when you sail.
Oh yeah. Sailors develop very tight relationships with their vessel. They're like I don't know. As I mentioned, they're not like inanimate objects. It's not just like some cold machine or something or other. Instead, they breathe and they keep you alive. And you take care of them, and they take care of you. And this was a boat that I totally created too, so I felt like I really let it down somehow. I didn't make it strong enough. I didn't do this. What was I doing up here in the first place and all of that? So yeah, I grieved the loss of the boat. But I was also a little happy that I wasn't with somebody else, because to be with somebody else on the voyage, although it would have simplified a lot of things, and somebody else would have been a lot smarter than me coming up with solutions to problems and whatnot. In the end, there was no way I could even produce enough. There was barely enough water for myself, so probably at least one of us would have died. And that, I can't imagine how much worse that would have been the situation.
Steve, I think we want to hear about food. Can you tell us about the Doritos and their role in your life?
Yeah, anything that floats in the ocean develops an ecology. It becomes a little island. Light bulbs, pieces of styrofoam, bits of boat, anything. They grow barnacles and weed, and fish start gathering around them. And so fish started gathering around the raft within a few days. Little nubs of gooseneck barnacles started growing, and things like that. And the Dorado, which many people know in restaurants as mahi-mahi, also called dolphin fish, although not to be confused with, the mammal. They started gathering around the raft. They grow up to about 6 feet, way up to 85 pounds. They swim at about 50 knots. They're very, very fast. They're incredibly smart. And mostly I tried to stick to catching small ones because I caught one large one. I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but it was fairly early on in the voyage, and it just about beat me to pieces. And every time I caught one, it was a threat to me because I'm catching fish with a spear in an inflated raft in the middle of the Atlantic.
And they were attacking you too.
They were bumping me, yeah. They learned, within about 24 hours, they learned what the range of the spear was, and they'd circle around outside the raft, just outside that range. But they would bump the bottom. We're not sure why they do this. Some people theorize that they rub against things in order to get rid of parasites, so that perhaps they're knocking off little nubs of beginnings of barnacles for food. And I think to a certain degree they just like it, frankly. A lot of the fish, I learned their personalities over time, as well as know them by color, changes, stars, and all that. And there was this one big male that would love to come up in the afternoon and come back to the raft and he'd just whack it around, pushing it around on the ocean, like it was a nice little game. So they were all a little bit different, but I could use that in the end to draw them to me. I could push my knees down into this thin rubber floor, and they'd come up to bump that and get close enough where I could actually catch them with the spear.
I was going to ask earlier, you mentioned in the conclusion of your book, you got back into sailing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have another ship after Napoleon Solo? And if so, what did you return?
Yeah, I've had a number of boats in my life. After Napoleon Solo, I guess the next boat, because I've sailed other people's boats as well. It's not just all my own. So the next year, I sailed another guy's boat in a single-handed race in Bermuda called Javelin. In the late 80s, we bought a boat called Carpuzia, came with that name, which meant watermelon in Greece. The boat was built in Greece, and we just kept the name. In 2000, roughly, we bought a 40-foot trimaran called Trifina, which came with that name, in Australia. So I don't know. I've had a bunch.
This might be getting ahead of myself, but with the fish, it said in the book that every time you caught a fish, you kind of felt sad, and that it just wasn't right to take the life, but through it all, you knew that you needed them to survive, so why would you feel so upset for them?
Why would I feel so upset? Yeah, that gets into, again, the remark I made about how we operate on lots of different levels. And for those of you who read Adrift, you know that I kind of divvy myself up into an emotional part, a rational part, and a physical part. Well, they do have different needs. Like my physical part, it was dying, it was starving, it was dehydrated. So that physical part of me just wanted to consume all the water all the time and kill all the fish and eat them all and all that sort of thing. It was pretty simple. But the emotional part of me got very, very attached, and it's a little difficult to explain. But I think I really got to understand how hunter-gatherer types of societies get very so integrated with their physical environment upon which they depend. And because you realize that these creatures have personality, they have existence, they have soul, if you will. And for me, they were superior to me out there. They were spiritual creatures, or certainly became it. And that part of it had to do with myself, too, that I felt, especially as time went on, more and more open to the world, if you will, that I was connected. I was only there because of the grace and mystery of the environment. And even though it was testing me and it was quite difficult, that it did provide enough for me, and that was only because of the fish. And as I say, the the book, I mean, to me, they're the heroes of the story. I was out there, dying as kind of this clumsy human observer of this amazing environment that somehow came together and made sense to me in the end. That they really almost killed me with the hole in the bottom of the raft. There was always a danger. They became my friends, my only companions. So it'd be like, you get attached to a pet, and here I had my doggies, as I call them, all around me, and yet I had to kill one every once in a while. So it got to be increasingly difficult, that emotional part of me that might kill any fish, or anything else for that matter.
And that saved you?
And they say, yeah.
And how did that happen? The Doritos?
Because of the ecosystem that developed around the raft, which drew all kinds, more and more things, predators including. As I got close to land, birds, especially frigate birds, came out. The frigate birds are hunting flying fish, which is their favorite food, and the Dorado's favorite food is flying fish. So when the frigate bird's hovering over the ocean see a school of Dorado, they know that's a good sign of food. So they were hovering above the raft every morning, and fishermen came out from the island, and they're looking for signs of fish. And they're, as a friend of mine calls it, they're naturally literate. They see things in the real environment that give them messages and tell whole stories. So they saw the frigate birds and came out to find the fish, and there was me.
There was you. We're ready to take some questions from the audience. If people have some, did you have a follow-up, Arthur? So, do you have any questions from the audience? Or go ahead.
How did I combat hypothermia was the question. Initially it was cold at night, and I was wet about half of the journey, so that makes hypothermia a problem. I was able to get, in my ditch kit, I had a space blanket, and I was able, when I dove back down in the boat, I got a piece of cushion and a sleeping bag. So basically, even though I was still cold and uncomfortable, wrapping myself up in all this stuff kept me warm. Thanks.
All right.
Can you hold the mic up and talk?
All right. So I know about your story, but are there any other survival stories that you admire or connect with that you know of?
Yeah, there's lots of them, actually. I've been kind of fortunate that when this happened to me, doing TV shows and interviews and traveling around, I've met lots of survivors, some of whom have written books about it and so on. I actually carried a survival manual written by a man named Dougal Robertson, who was adrift in the Pacific with his family. He wrote a book called Survive the Savage Seas, which is a phenomenal book about ocean survival. There's a recent book called 438 Days about a Mexican fisherman who went off with a young mate, and they got caught in a storm, lost power, and drifted off in their mothercraft. And he showed up on the Western Pacific after 438 days. It's an astounding story. I don't know, I find almost all survival stories interesting, whether fictional or not. But, people are familiar with a mental block.
Which one?
I don't want to say Swiss Family Robinson Crusoe, but Robinson Crusoe was actually based on a true story of a man named Alexander Selkirk, who was marooned on a Pacific island for years until he was found.
Now you read a book, the book of Tinkerbell. You read that when you were about the age of these students.
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about that.
Tinkerbell. There was a man named Robert Manry who was a newspaper reporter. And he just bought this little wooden boat for, I think, $200 or $250 or something for his family to go sailing around the lakes and stuff. And then he got this idea that, maybe I can sail to England in this. So he ducked it over and made a little cabin on it and sailed to England back in I want to say the 1950s or maybe it was the early 60s. And there are a number of people who've done those sorts of things. You really don't have to have sophisticated big yacht in order to have adventures, nor do you have to cross an ocean with them.
Or in a raft.
Or in a raft, yeah. I mean, for me it was just like messing around along the coast and boats. It was very cool when I was, especially kind of your age.
You have a question?
Hi, my name is Ayla, and I'm honored to be able to ask you guys questions, and you questions. And I was wondering, how much longer do you believe you could have survived on the raft if you were not rescued when you were?
It's really hard for me to know. Especially towards the end of the voyage, I was a lot weaker. I'd lost about a third of my weight, which is very typical of ocean survivors. I was pretty badly dehydrated, and it was in the Caribbean, or near the Caribbean, so afternoon it was incredibly hot, and it was very difficult for me to function. And so if you asked me in the middle of the day at that point in the voyage, it was like, I'm done, I can't do this again. And then somehow the sun would get towards the horizon and things would cool off a little bit. The Dorado would come back and follow, the raft. They followed the raft every evening. And I go, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. I think, we can do this again. But frankly, it was, during the entire survival experience, and this is typical of these experiences, you just don't know, because any little thing can change at any moment, and that's the end. That's really what separates, I guess, a survival scenario from everyday life, although actually everyday life, the same thing can happen. We're just not quite so aware of it usually. So I don't really know, but I was very worried about missing the islands, and if I had done that, that would have been it. There's no way I could have survived that, because then the next landfall would have been England, months and months and months ago.
I'm going to take this moment to explain Mr. Sicker's reference to the book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a bit of a celebration on the 38th day, because Douglas Robertson with his family had lived for 38 days. So for me anyway, early on in the raft, it was like, well, that's even unattainable. There's no way I can do that. So once I reached that mark, it was like, oh, reason to celebrate. I had some water. And a few days later, I speared a Dorado, and like I said, it was a pretty strong fish, so it snapped the spear, turned it around, and rammed it into the bottom tube. So I was left with a raft that was more than half sunk. It only had a few inches of freeboard, which made life really hellish. I couldn't tend to the solar stills and produce water properly. I couldn't fish properly. The raft was really not making much progress through the water or anything. It was really dreadful. And it took about 10 days of attempted repairs before I really reached the low point in the voyage, where I really almost gave up. I just couldn't figure out a solution, but I kind of slapped myself awake, if you will, realizing that, no, this is going to be the end in a matter of hours if I don't find a solution. So I searched, did sort of a mind search of everything I had in the raft. And in my kit, I had a lot of gear that I wasn't really intended to be useful in a life raft, but I might need it on the boat for some reason. And amongst all that stuff, I had a utensil kit, which was stainless steel, fork, knife, spoon, and they were pins. And that allowed me to basically cut holes. If the tear is like lips, cut a hole in the top and the bottom lip, and ram the pin through with a plug of foam in there. And that way, when I lashed it up, it couldn't be forced off when I inflated the raft. So that's what the reference to the handle of the fork was, is that, you never know what's going to be useful. Everything's a raw material.
And it was a Boy Scout fork?
It was a Boy Scout
fork. Great. Up there?
So before you had mentioned that the water has always been like your safe haven, so when this happened to you, did you kind of feel betrayed?
That's a good question. No, I didn't actually. I think I've always liked wilderness environments. Even before I started sailing, I kind of grew up running around in the woods, and I was into mountain climbing and all that. And nature is what it is. It's not. I don't know, it doesn't harbor ill will towards us, but it can be a hostile place. And I love that, because I guess that comes with the territory, that if you want to experience the freedom that you can have in a wilderness environment. You have to take total responsibility to yourself and realize what the risks are. And that's true in life in general to me, that, you know, life comes with risks and you have to accept what they are and face up to them. And anything good that I've ever done or tried to do involves some kind of risk. I mean, I think, you know, just being in high school involves risk. So I didn't feel let down or anything. And in the end, the ocean and even this experience, you know, provided me with huge gifts longer term in life, so I don't regret it.
Go ahead. You have a question? Either way.
Hi, I'm Windsor Bean, and I was wondering what your worst injury or sickness you had on the journey was and why.
I'm sorry, can you repeat
that?
What was your worst injury or sickness you had on the journey and why?
The worst sickness or injury I had on the journey. Geez, that's a good one. I'm not sure how to classify worse, so I'll just name a few things. What's common is if you're in a saturated salt environment, saltwater environment, you develop these boils that open up, and so you end up with open ulcers. If anybody's ever had a canker sore or something like that in their mouth, it's like that, but on the outside of the skin. I had hundreds of these, and I'm in a salt-saturated environment, so it was painful. And that's a very long-term kind of chronic problem. It's not critical. I wasn't going to die of it necessarily, but it was very difficult to live with. I was trying to collect rainwater and whatnot, but little particulates from this orange canopy would get into it. It was very foul. And at one point, so I was trying to do these concoctions in order to make it drinkable, and at one point I made myself very sick, and I thought I actually killed myself. But after about 24 hours, I recovered from that. Otherwise, it was just nicks and cuts. Nothing heals in that kind of environment, so a minor cut would wouldn't heal for over a month or more.
And starvation and thirst.
Starvation and thirst. Those were the most difficult things, chronic problems, was really especially the thirst, the being dehydrated, not having enough to drink. It's hard to relate to unless you've been through it, because it's not like a pain exactly, but it's just something that just wears on you. It just consumes your attention.
What?
I was wondering, what is one thing you would like to forget from the trip?
One thing I'd like to forget from the trip? Yeah, that's a very interesting question. You'd think I'd like to forget the whole bloody thing, but actually, I don't think I want to forget any of it. We live with paradox in things, and one of the two sides of looking at things, and you can't really appreciate pleasure, any kind of pleasure, if you've not really suffered in some way, unfortunately. I mean, or the more you suffer, the more you realize, wow, that, not suffering is such a cool thing. I think that's really what the journey did for me, that every moment that I'm not in pain, every moment that I'm not desperately lonely is a huge gift. We don't realize what the value of that is. So, no, I don't want to go back and feel those things again, but I don't regret any of it.
I think I read somewhere you were reminded of those experiences every time you saw people holding hands or a kind word between people. Yeah, that kind of knocks me out now. People ask about flashbacks a lot. Sure. And I don't really get flashbacks like, oh, I'm there again. I think I had one dream afterwards where I used of the crash. But I've talked a lot about it and written about it, and that kind of got those things out. But what brings things back are feelings, and sometimes I'm just like unbelievably touched when people are just kind to one another, or things like that. It just brings up this feeling of those things that I was so without, I think, and that of which we are capable all the time, and yet we don't take advantage of it. So,
if I can just ask one more question.
Sure.
If you were to give any pointers or tips for someone who's interested in being a survivalist, what would you say?
Pointers or tips? Ooh, you guys have great questions. I'm not sure. For me, reading books. It doesn't have to be Adrift, but reading about other people's experiences, talking to other people about their experiences is really valuable. Whether or not you're in that specific environment or not, because, like I say, early on, one of the toughest parts of my voyage, one of the toughest parts of the survival experience, is if you escape the immediate threat. That you can prove that through training and all that kind of stuff. But the really difficult period is right after that, this recoil period, when you're beating yourself up about all your failures. How did I was so stupid to get myself into the situation, and so on. And yet, in the back of your mind, if you know of other people who've gone through difficult times, they show, well, you know what, it can be done. They felt the same way I did. Maybe I am alone. Maybe nobody's even gone through this specific kind of scenario before, but maybe it can be done. And so they were in a sort of a general inspiration, if you will, to that. And then beyond that, you can kind of learn other lessons. There are a lot of little things, like I'll just mention a couple. One is not to focus on the big picture. Okay, I got to get way down there, but oh my God, that's I can't think about that. So instead, just divvy it up into what are the little steps that are necessary in order to get to that end, and attack one at a time.
Good advice.
So, there are lots of little tricks like that.
You have a question up there?
So, you said you were a Boy Scout. What rank did you get to?
What rank? I think I was a Life Scout, but I ended up, this is back a long time ago. The Boy Scouts was, I don't know what the organization is like now, but we were very active, basically, running around in the outdoors and stuff. Camping and mountain climbing and all of that. And I got involved in leadership, actually. I ended up being an assistant scoutmaster way back then. So I wasn't a super scout or anything, but I like messing around in the wilderness.
Over here.
Yeah, do you believe that there might have been any chance that you could have been rescued sooner than 76 days?
Is there any chance I could have gotten rescued sooner?
Well, didn't 7 ships pass you by?
9, actually.
9
ships passed me. I had a whole arsenal of flares, but it's very easy to miss things in the ocean. It's very difficult to see them, even if you're looking for them. You know that they're there. So it shouldn't have been a huge surprise. But if I had had different kinds of modern equipment that exists now, some of which was improved just within months of my landing, there's a good chance that I would have been picked up a lot sooner, but it just wasn't today.
And just another question. Sure. Do you think, when you fell asleep at certain times, do you think you might have drifted past an island, or maybe a ship passed you by?
If I fell asleep, might a ship have passed me by, or I'd gone by an island? Well, yeah, I wouldn't have gone by an island, because I actually landed on the first available island. Unless there's, Atlantis that crops up in the middle of the Atlantic and disappears again or something. But yes, quite possibly ships could have passed me by. And I was very conscious of that. I tried to get up on a regular basis and, look all the way around the horizon and stuff, but it's hard to know.
We have a couple of minutes left for questions for Steve, so go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Callahan, and thank you for being here. My name is Samantha, and I have a few questions that are related to each other. So why did you decide to write the book, and what were the other titles you thought of writing the book, and why did you choose Adrift?
Oh, that's really a great question. I think I decided to write the book ever since I was, younger than you are. I always kept journals. As I said, I was kind of socially awkward and whatnot, didn't have huge numbers of friends, and most of us were kind of oddballs. And I found that writing things down about problems that I had and so on was a good way of working through things, kind of like a good sounding board or another best friend. And so I'd always used writing. And when I go off sailing, I'd always kept a detailed log, not only about, how many miles you do and all that kind of stuff, but also, things you experience or things you think about during the trip. So when I was in the raft, I kept this little log and kept notes and whatnot. They gave me, to a certain degree, a sense of purpose. And when I landed on the island, I was asked by a magazine to write an article about it. And since I was dead broke, had nothing, that seemed like a good idea. And then people would ask me, are you going to write a book, and so on. So I started the process. And so for me, initially at least, I had to write the book. I had to... as I mentioned, life is chaos, and that certainly was a chaotic experience in many ways, but there were things that you can abstract out of it that make sense. That's the prime role of story, in my view, is to kind of organize things in a way that you draw something of value out of it. And I needed desperately to draw something of value out of these months of suffering and chaos, and so it was a natural result of that. In terms of the title, initially I wrote the book as a man alone because I felt like I was very much a single person. I had rejected humanity and all that kind of stuff.
I think our time is up. Steve, thanks so much.